I'm Tate Chamberlin, hosting the Hub Culture Chronicle discussions this week in sync with Hatch a Better World. We're in Dubai for COP28 with the Future Mobility Hub. We've got Tim Degraye, Topher White, and Stan Stalnaker in the house. Stan and I started this collaboration last year in Sharm el-Sheikh at COP27. How's it going, guys?
It's great to be back in the podcast room with you.
That's right.
And it's great to be extending the Hatch Hub Culture collaboration around these leadership discussions. So for the Chronicles, another moment in another hub, this time here live from Dubai.
Looking out over Dubai.
Yeah, looking out. We've got this view around the 10th floor in a really great venue. It's really grown in size in the last year. Just a warm-up question. If you were to start a social movement, what cause would you champion? And it could be your current.
Sound responsibility. Let's just throw that out there. I don't know, just
Sure.
the first thing that came to mind is people need to be aware of the noise that they're making.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, this idea that sound is life, you know, that everything that's alive vibrates in its own way. Looking back to the beginning of the universe, the way in which we're able to study it is through the acoustic signatures of the Big Bang and the microwave background and all these things. There's so much in that's meaningful to us, and the more we pollute it, the more we're losing touch with the thing that allows us to know what's normal and what's not.
Yeah, especially in this day and age of social media and everyone has something to say and it's all important and everyone's speaking all at the same time. And it's hard to really get words to come through isolated and to get a distinct meaning across because there's so much static, there's so much going on. It's hard to single out a single voice in order to understand the message properly.
The word that comes to mind to me is cacophony on that regard. I wouldn't say that's our mission on this, but for us, it's about collaboration. And I think we're on the verge of seeing and feeling the tools of collaboration move into a new dimension, and that's audio. So, the power of listening.
For sure.
Yeah, today's podcast, The Power of Listening. What are some of the ways that we listen?
I think even to the points that are just being made, I think one of the most amazing things about people is our ability to isolate sounds from each other, There's this cacophony coming at us all the time, whether it's the vibrations from the earth or even each other talking or a cocktail party. But our ability to focus in on a person and hear just what they're saying or even just an individual sound, it's really incredible. And that's the power that we've developed over time. To our, and we have the ability to throw so much away.
Yeah, we call it deep listening,
Yeah.
where you take one source of sound or one concept and you just focus in on that. It's like meditation in many ways.
Mm-hmm. And that's part of what it takes to. If focus is the way in which we accomplish anything, it is a superpower that we clearly have. And then, of course, in the work that we do around listening to nature, animals have their own kind of area in which they both fight over territory in the soundscape and territory in different frequency realms. And then here we are, this many people all around speaking in the exact same realm, and yet we find a way to focus in on the voices and the sounds we like the most.
Yeah, it brings to mind also, when you see people drive by in their cars and they have their car stereo and it's booming, the boom, 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 boom. Everyone wants to kind of make their sound signature in the world and make themselves heard, I'm
hearing back about this time in history when there was this battle for sound. It used to be that you would just have the bigger and bigger speakers. Electricity as a new idea for advertising in the United States. And that they were just blast as loud as they could out of every store. And then somebody was like, whoa, let's pull this back. So sound used to be as much of a nuisance as it is for anything else that we see in society with ideas. So we can fix these things.
How about you, Stan? What are some of the ways that you've just seen the way people listen?
Well, I'm sort of thinking about this in the way that we engage with people. At a hub, we have a hub happening right now, and we have, in some moments, 3 to 4 simultaneous events. But the way that people listen in the context of leadership is, I think, really interesting, because what I found happens is that almost like you can think of them like audio memes start to occur at these moments, things like COP, things like Davos. You start to hear things get repeated. So I remember last year at the COP in Sharm, the word that I kept hearing was regenerative. And I realized I had this kind of epiphany that regenerative was breaking out of the agricultural world and moving into what I would think of as regenerative everything, regenerative finance, regenerative mobility, regenerative everything. And so it changed my understanding of the word because I was watching other people use the word in a different way. So when you're listening to things, there's a very specific, like Topher just referenced, but there's also the general that comes out of the cacophony. And one of the things that I like to think about from these moments is what is coming out of the cacophony and creating a new resonance. Last year it was regenerative. It'll be really interesting to see what it is from this COP. One of the words that's coming right now is inclusion. Mm-hmm. So it's inclusion in a lot of ways. We had a thing on DEI with female quotient this morning, diversity, equity, and inclusion. People talking a lot about inclusion, but also inclusion of essentially big oil in the climate conversation. You know, the climate movement has obviously been very against big oil because of the damage that it's doing to the environment. But there's other elements of the way that our society operates that are connected, obviously, to these fossil fuels. The inclusion of big oil in the COP conversation in a way that it's happening here is changing the narrative. Some would argue for the better, some would argue for the worse, but it's definitely like a new sound coming out of COP.
I like that. Yeah, I think that change and trust is built at the speed of relationship, and sometimes you have to meet people where they're at. And so I really love that framework of, I was so conflicted on even coming to Dubai, but you're right, including them into the conversation and having them feel the influence and impact on the world, I think is going to be really powerful out of it.
They're a dominant force. They have to be on board and be a part of any solution. Also, we all rely upon this entire infrastructure just to get any solutions out there. So it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and you can't have a proper view, a vision of the whole unless you include every part of the discussion, every angle. If you say, no, I don't want to hear what you have to say because you cause damage, that's exclusionary, right? And that doesn't lead to any form of result.
I like the way that ties in with what Stan was saying around the ideas that sort of come out because you keep hearing the words show up. Like that's not something it's something that could be forced, but it's not in the situation you're talking about. It's a very sort of organic adoption of new trends that come out of these things just because the ideas keep showing up, or the words keep showing up.
Right, it resonates with people, like you say. It's inclusion, and then people start. It's a very good point because it's something that people are finding ways to describe what they're feeling or what their goals are and things like that. And you know, everyone's struggling to use the right language, to choose the right word and stuff like that. And it's true, as it gets repeated, it becomes more adopted, and it's like, oh yes, this word actually represents how I'm feeling. Yeah.
Do you feel that there is a common narrative around in COP that people feel the need to follow, or do you feel that people are especially empowered in these platforms to speak their mind because they feel like they're here for a reason and it's urgent and they have to get their points out, which can be divisive or it can be inclusive or it can be all sorts of different things. But I'm not seeing a lot of bashfulness or trepidation about saying what people think here so far.
I think it depends on the environment you're in.
That's a good one.
Honest. Like inside the blue zone, there's a lot of entrenched interests and they really vary across the board. And one of the challenges with this process is that not everyone can actually afford to be in the room.
Sure.
So there's a lot of people who are, again, going back to my earlier point about inclusion versus exclusion, there are a lot of people who are excluded from being able to participate just because of where we are. But on the other hand, there's a lot of people who are participating because of where we are. So, you know, when we were in Egypt last year, or when we've been in Madrid, or we've been in Copenhagen, different communities are able to participate. I think that's the beauty of the COP system moving things around. And, you know, we know that next year it'll probably be in Australia, the year after in Brazil. Those will be very different forms of inclusion. And so I think people have to take the moment and participate as they can. The other thing is that we can all participate digitally now in different ways. And that audio inclusion, whether it's, you know, or visual even, is super important because that's as much or more the narrative than anything. Like you can do a world of damage with one tweet or one comment. You can also do a world of good with that. And it just depends on the method and the view that you're taking.
I think it's so interesting how climate has become an intersection of so many different subjects, whether it be justice or nature itself or you know, inclusion, DEI. It's become like the backbone of a lot of different movements, or at least the path upon which a lot of different movements seek to express their ways of a changing world or their vision for a changing world. So yeah, it's interesting that COP has now become a platform for a lot of different ideas to come out that might not have been in the climate conversation in the past.
The three of you are in the industry of listening. I'm hoping that you'll tell me a little bit more about your projects.
I make headphones. I don't mean to say that in a diminutive way, but when you say that, a lot of people are like, okay, yeah, headphones, and they think Beats or Bose or, all these things. But when I say headphones, it's the best way in order to do your deep listening, to listen critically, to listen without distraction. Having headphones on your head allows you to really focus on what you're listening to and curate what you're listening to, not just music, but any sound in the whole spectrum. And when you put on headphones, it can protect your hearing from loud noises around you. I'm not talking about ANC because that's another conversation, and it's a double-edged sword. And I think ANC actually, personally, I think it does more harm than good from a health perspective.
Acoustic noise cancellation.
Yeah, acoustic noise cancellation. I'm against its current state, but headphones is a really great way to really focus on sound and the pop world over. So what we do is we make the world's first wireless headphone that can stream lossless, uncompressed audio at up to 96 kilohertz, 24-bit depth audio. Mm-hmm. And in order to do that, it's a Wi-Fi headphone because Bluetooth does not give you the bandwidth to allow for an uncompressed signal to go through. It just doesn't have the bandwidth. So in order to do that, we had to build a computer. So we put a computer inside a headphone, gave it Wi-Fi capability. We're running Linux, and based on that, we decided, okay, well, it's a computer. We built a platform. We can run apps, and it can essentially be customized to do any form of audio operation that you need. So we can attach, for example, sensors to ear cups and get immediate biofeedback and have that, put that in the computer and have it run algorithms to modify maybe sound generated that's being generated within the headphone to do a variety of things. So we do know that there's a sound component to autism management and ketamine clinics for PTSD and a lot of mental health issues that can be resolved or managed with a sound component. So already right there, you have a massive door opening for a connected, intelligent, computational audio headset device. We call it you start by saying, oh yeah, it's a headphone. But when you talk and dig deeper, you have to call it something different. So the term that we've come up with is a computational audio headset.
I think in understanding how transformative this is, going back a little bit in history and saying like with the audio revolution that we sort of came into, how the compressed audio became such a part of our lives that we forgot a lot of the things we were missing. So yeah, maybe talk a little about that. Or
Absolutely. I mean, I went straight into the deep end on what it can do, just to kind of just like take it away from audio for a second, just to show people that there's something more than just music that the headphones can do. But at the end of the day, we take music for granted. I think everyone takes music for granted because it's so omnipresent in our day-to-day lives. I don't think there's a single person that I know, at least, that doesn't respond to music in a very deep and personal and intimate way. And I do believe in a crazy sort of way that music is going to save the planet. It's going to heal the planet. It enables people to communicate when language is not sufficient. Music does the job.
Music is probably the most, the favorite thing of humanity on a whole, on the average, I'd say.
Exactly. And so why not treat it with that due respect? That's honor music by representing it in the clearest, cleanest, purest way possible. I don't understand why we take something such for granted and we mistreat it so much. So we're all about the sanctity of the signal. We try to keep the signal as pristine as possible until it gets to your ears.
I mean, I think it's a miracle the extent to which music is available to people all over the place. But again, the question is, it's a version of music that was optimized for delivery and mass consumption. Yeah. And now, only in those mass numbers do we see some of the drawbacks that they're missing out on that might have been available in the past the presence of real live music.
Absolutely. Yeah. And live music is probably one of the best examples of how you can, recordings are great because they're crafted in a studio with a lot of time and effects and everything, and it's like a sculpture of sorts, right? It's an audio sculpture. But a live performance is something that's spontaneous and it's in the moment, and it just it's fleeting. It's for a fleeting moment, right? Mm-hmm. And to be able to capture that in the highest resolution, the highest audio quality possible, and relive it, it will bring you back into that moment. It's a very, very powerful thing. It's, we say that smells remind us of our childhood. Certain smells take you back, and this, that, the other, right? And same thing with sound. A song can take you back to a time in your life where maybe you had a horrible breakup, or you just got the best job of your life, or whatever, some celebratory thing. And a melody will take you right back there. And so it's extremely powerful. And I think, people take it for granted because you can't see sound. You only know what you see, right? And so we see, this room and us sitting around here and stuff like that. But sounds is this thing that we just don't understand. It's intangible.
Topher, what brought you to the rainforest?
I think in many ways it was sound. So growing up in San Francisco, I was just so interested and obsessed with the gibbons, these amazing apes that happen to be at San Francisco Zoo as well. They make the most amazing songs you can hear from roughly like 4 or 5 parking lots over outside the zoo. You're basically parking in the neighborhood nearby and you're hearing them. And then you get in there and the way they move and the way they interact was just amazing. By far, my favorite creature to interact with. And several years ago, I was working about 10 years ago. I was working in Fusion in France, and realized there was an opportunity to go volunteer in Indonesia at this gibbon reserve to go like pour cement for 2 weeks, help kill gibbon enclosures. So I went out there and just fell in love with this place. It's just like you wake up, it's like you're on another planet. We can even listen to this type of stuff, on this podcast if we'd like to. But then realizing that so much of the gibbon recovery in these areas, gibbons are probably the first ape, if there is one, that will go extinct just based on habitat loss and things like that. And this one organization was trying their best to rehabilitate gibbons and release them into the wild, which took a long time. They were focusing a lot on illegal logging on the outskirts of a pretty small reserve. So again, first time I went to the rainforest was to discover gibbons, the most magical of all possible rainforest creatures, and then realized that really should focus on some technical solutions to fighting illegal logging. So I proposed this solution that would use the sound of chainsaws to detect them in real time around this reserve, and send an alert to these local groups that were trying to stop illegal logging. They said, yes, please build that for us. And that was when the hard part started. But yes, it was largely the gibbons that brought me out there, and possibly the most magical sound on earth is the sound of gibbons calling to each other in Southeast Asia.
Yeah, no, I loved your story when you were out, I think, with the gibbons in the rainforest, and you heard chainsaws going off, and you pursued the sound until you met them.
Yeah. Oh, so that's an example of like biting off. An idea is great until suddenly you gotta like act on it, right? So easily a year and a half after that first encounter, had built this system using old smartphones in a plastic box with a microphone on the outside and some solar panels. The idea, we put them up, they could listen to all the sounds of the forest, capture chainsaws, and send an alert to these local groups. And you show up out, you're like, okay, it's a great idea. They say, yes, please come build it. You get out there, and then suddenly you have to like put this thing together and put it up in trees. So we go out to the outskirts of this reserve, and this guy climbs up a few feet, puts it up there, comes back down. All these guys are sitting around smoking cigarettes. I can't understand them whatsoever. And then I get this alert on my phone that says there's some chainsaws, and everyone kind of quiets down, and you can hear them kind of off in the distance. And the system worked, which was exciting. But now suddenly you gotta buckle up and get out there. And so that was kind of the moment. Wasn't quite sure what was going to happen with that, but it ended up that they were able to talk them down, and that was this first initial event within, I guess, a couple days of like actually taking this idea out to the rainforest that gave us the belief that it could really work, and the people there said that it would. But then, of course, scaling that up, making it happen again and again and again around the world, means you run into every sort of problem, from technical to environmental to social to financial. It's definitely not a problem that's as simple as detecting chainsaws, and that's what we've sort of been dealing with for the 10 years since. With great effect, I will say.
I love I think moment you two connected just before this. It just like launched into a great conversation because there's so many similarities to the two of your projects. What are you two like? What did you first just kind of engage in? Take me through that.
Well, to that effect, I mean, there's so much sound. He's talking about the sound and the emotional effect it has on people, but sound is one of these things that people, again, we rely upon it in so many ways, but we appreciate it the least of our senses, perhaps. And there's all these environments, like we were very visual creatures. The more ostentatious you can be in a certain way, the more you sort of stand out. But in a forest, for example, a rainforest, you can't see more than 15, to 20 feet in front of you. And you have lots of creatures that are pretty small. And so sound is the way in which creatures assert themselves, communicate, the way in which they say, I'm here, the way in which they distract others. And there's almost this battle for territory just in the sound range. And so, a frog that's, 1.5 centimeters long can make a noise that you can hear, 200 meters away. And is that a small creature? Like, it's definitely a powerful one from a certain perspective. And so whether that be for, tracking animals or tracking each other, or even just chainsaws and threats, chainsaw sounds, they travel through the forest. They travel, over 1.5 kilometers. We can hear them pretty far away, especially high in trees. And so there's no way you're going to pick up, the cameras aren't going to do much for you there. And so sound is like, and also this forest is sound. Like, it's a cacophony of noise, to use Stan's word. There's so much going on there, and that's really how it expresses itself.
Yeah, absolutely. And the sound, I mean, there's the component of sound within the rainforest also, but then there's the component of sound for people who aren't in the rainforest to allow them to connect on an emotional level to it. Mm-hmm. So if you're listening to it in, glorious immersive audio, uncompressed, and you feel like you're there, that connects you emotionally to what it's being. Most people never in their lifetimes ever get the privilege of going to the rainforest. They'll see a photo, they'll see a documentary on TV or something like that, but they'll never really be there. And if we could get a lossless, high-resolution, immersive audio stream of the rainforest out to people that they can log in and listen to it, they can tune in and listen to it at any given time and connect to it emotionally in real time, then that it's almost like being there. A friend of mine said that, Tim, what you've built a teleportation machine with the headphones, because you can do that with the headphones. You can tune into it and stuff like that. And it's like a teleportation device where you can listen live to a sound that's happening somewhere else on the other side of the planet. And that's a magical, magical thought.
Yeah, even right now, for example, live from Sumatra right now.
That's live right now.
Oh, and there's Gibbons back there. He's been what?
That's amazing.
Well, and then this is happening all over the world all the time. We can keep going, but to your point, there's still so much that can be done on this, right? Just a simple audio stream brings you there, but then how do you actually make it feel like you're there and bring all these things out?
Right. Yeah. I mean, you have to give it perspective. You have to maybe educate people on what they're listening to. Maybe give maybe sound bites of what a gibbon sounds like, so that they can identify it themselves and stuff like that. Have some kind of maybe an app where you have the different sounds. You can click on it and go, oh, that's what that sounds like.
Funny you should ask, Tim. There's all sorts of things going on there.
Yeah. Well, great.
one of the amazing things that we should connect is over this idea of quality of sound, and kind of backing up to what you're talking about, like lossless versus not lossless audio. Again, everyone's idea of what audio is defined by MP3s and these compressed things we've been listening to, which in many ways are taking the world sound, which is entirely uncompressed as we hear it, and then compressing it down to be able to put into a small file. And that's all based on this idea, not to get too technical, but psychoacoustics, which is that we throw away things that we think people don't hear, right? And most of us don't know what we're missing, but Tim does. And so Tim can hear the difference between like a lossless audio file and the rest. Now, in many ways, when you're off in the forest trying to stream live audio out of the middle of nowhere, you're going to go for as much compression as you can, right? Because you have these terrible cell phone networks. You have very little power to deal with, under the tree canopy. Solar panels don't don't work as well under tree canopies. And so you're going to make as many cuts as you can. But at the same time, when you're listening for animals, a lot of animals exist in frequency ranges that humans can't hear anyway. Exactly the same things that would have been thrown away by these psychoacoustic compression codecs that everyone uses for MP3s. And so we have this pressure both to get the sound out, make use of these great opportunities, but then we can't fall back on it. So there's this almost a roundabout way in which Tim and I come together on this, because we have, in order to hear all the species that we want to listen to understand what they're feeling, what they're thinking, and eventually what they can tell us about themselves and each other. We have to listen in ranges that people can't. And so suddenly we end up in the exact same degree of this lossless audio and how to deal with it.
Right, which furthers the point of how important it is
Exactly
to strive for lossless, especially with where technology is right now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're able to stream 4K and 8K video and this, that, the other. I mean, of course, there's a lot of compression with video, and that's okay because the way the eyes work, they work very differently than the ears. The ears are listening to a constant stream. Eyes are constantly darting around, and what you're doing is you're building. Someone once told me, I think it was Tom actually, who told me that the way we look is that our brain maps out the image of what we see, and our eye just basically darts around to refresh those parts. So that's why images can deceive, and that's how, for example, magicians and illusionists and stuff like that, they get their work done, is because they use the drawbacks of our vision, our weak points of vision, in order to create an illusion. But it's very hard to do an auditory illusion.
Well, we've definitely seen some. Okay, so growing up first in the sort of the chainsaw detection realm, which is the first version of this tech we were trying to build. Again, if you tell someone there's a chainsaw in there, they're going to hear it. So just listening, for people to listen to something and like try and find something out, they're going to begin to sort of pull it out. Computers can be a little more deterministic, so people listening to audio streams to listen for threats just gets to be a little imaginative. But that speaks to your point that audio, because it's like one sense removed, it's a little bit more imaginative. It's easier to, I guess, have audio hallucinations in a way than visual ones, we would think. But that's where so much of what we get into transcends just the listening element of things. I think it's so important that our experience with sound, to your point, is listening, right? But if you want to really understand more of what's in there, you have to make it visual. There becomes a way in which audio itself just is the data source, and there's so many different ways you can represent it to people, which has both disability applications, but also just like, unveiling applications for all of us, because we all hear sound differently. We all focus on different things differently. And in order for you to even hear something, first you may need to be brought into it through visualization or through some sort of clue. And so I think it's one of the most exciting things out there, especially with the spatial audio work that you're into. What are all the ways in which sound is just a medium to communicate an order of magnitude more than just like what we're listening to,
Yeah.
or like how it all works together. Like beginning to isolate and understand the relationship between things is possible within sound, because in the sound is the personality. Like you can look at a photo or a video, or you can look at a fossil, or you can look at DNA, but you're not really going to understand what the thoughts or the feelings or even the activities or the needs of that animal are, or a person even, until you hear them speak, until they really express themselves in a certain way and move around.
Then you get the whole picture.
You get the whole picture, and so it's the culture and the personality matters as much as the form.
Yeah.
In a way.
I guess what we're saying is that everyone, we've been working on the visual component of things with VR and AR and stuff like that, but now we need to focus on audio to allow it to catch up to that to a certain extent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Are there any misconceptions or myths that come to mind about listening? Like, why is it being held back?
I think it's an exciting moment in listening. Here one of the misconceptions, which is also one of the good things about it, is that listening, we think of listening as linear, right? So if you want to listen to a podcast, you may be able to read it quickly or get a synopsis of it, or you can just listen to the whole thing. And I think people are used to listening to that whole thing, and that brings out so much more. When it comes to like listening to something to find something, there's a thought that if there's 6 hours of audio and there's a needle in that haystack, you got to listen to it to find it. That was the case in sort of people's conception of reality up until just maybe a couple of years ago. And now there's this sense that we can scan through much more quickly. But no, I think the linear element of sound, because it is sort of a real-time stream, or it's a stream of audio that goes through. I think that's actually we're transcending that now. So 6 hours is not 6 hours. It's just a moment that lasts for 6 hours, if that makes sense.
Time compression and expansion with audio.
It's true. But because unlike so many other things, sound is constant, right? There can be things within it, but there can be like moments within it that happen. But if you have 6 hours of recording, for example, that doesn't. It may take 6 hours to get from one point to the other, but within that, it actually takes those 6 hours for so many different things to express itself. Something that happens at the beginning can affect something that happens later. Different frequencies within it can affect the rest. So it's maybe sort of getting out there from an understanding point of view. But the point is that all of those 6 hours matter to reach some kind of conclusion that we may not expect to find, but which with greater data analysis and AI, we expect we should be able to. Because what we hear is just what we choose to hear or what we choose to pick out, because so much of hearing is ignoring, right? Throwing things away. That the more we can analyze those sound, I'm a big proponent of like massive audio collection, not just based around single questions, based around like archiving of life on Earth right now. Because there's nothing more, we can't expect what matters about our era just based upon our perception of living within it. And I think that the keeping a strong archive of what's happening here on Earth right now will matter for thousands of years in the future.
Agreed.
That's what I find so amazing about your work, Topher, honestly. So we've worked together over the last year, imagining new integrations for Zeek, our AI, and thinking about what I think is we're on the verge of a tip from a visual-based internet world to a more audio-based internet world. And especially when we enter the metaverse, audio becomes super important for that overall experience. And we're trying to eventually, over time, slowly evolve our AI to become auditory as well as written. And so right now, it's very much a written experience that the AI interacts with the community within Hub. But we expect very soon that's going to tip into an auditory experience. And one of the things I'm excited about with Topher is that we've had the opportunity at several hubs over the last year and a half or so to kind of go deep about what it means to embed nature into the education system for our AI's evolution. And that's a major focus for us in terms of our long-term desires for that. And the auditory data that Topher is collecting, someday we hope will be able to inform the evolution of the work that we're doing and pull it closer to that sphere. And then beyond that, I think, like you say, this information that you're collecting, whether it's in the forests or eventually under the sea, it could lead to AI unraveling how to communicate with other species. I think that's the ultimate thing. And we would love for our project to be in service of that. So imagine if with the millions of data points and sounds that Topher's collected, we can feed that into our AI, and then the AI can learn to discover how to communicate back to a gibbon. And imagine if AI could talk to a gibbon or talk to a whale, and think about how much we could learn. So that's where I get excited about this idea of listening. And we want to listen to nature, and we want our AI to listen to nature, and then our AI to learn from nature. That's like the fundamental goal of our AI. Yeah. And that, I think, differs from a lot of other people's goals with AI.
Zeke's nickname should be Dr. Doolittle.
Well, I think there's two really powerful sort of forks there. And one of them is what happens when you have, because again, there's lots of AIs that exist for purposes. And Zeke is such like a multi-purpose, almost like cultural awareness. I think you referred to almost like everything from the base of the culture to the defense structure for the entire hub culture ecosystem.
Yeah.
But modeling that on nature offers some real novelty compared to so many others, because if AIs ultimately converge towards, if models ultimately converge towards like what their data sets are, then really what you feed it with determines where it ends up, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so
I 100% agree. It's like evolutionary stock feed.
Mm-hmm. Exactly, and like what happens when an AI isn't just basing itself on like our actions. And that's not to say that nature is any less difficult or dark or whatever happens to be than us. But we have to understand there's definitely going to be some insights that come out of it that are novel and that can really push culture forward in a way that I know you want to. And talking to animals, I mean, that's certainly a goal that's out there. Some really great work being done at all over the place. Study project with sperm whales, Earth Species Project in a more like multi-species approach. But again, at no point in human history that we're aware of have we ever had a real conversation with a single other species. Even gorillas, chimpanzees, like these were not actual conversations, which means that every other species, of which of course there are millions we've described, is a whole different worldview. That's like almost a gulf. It's a whole other universe of thought that could lead to some real insights. It's as important as understanding what's out there in the universe is just the neural universe that exists here on Earth and what that can tell us about it. And within that, the eco-mimicry that comes out of it, whether it be designing AIs around how animals interact, or designing computer systems or data systems or city systems around natural flow. The same way you design a car hood based upon a beetle's shell. Biomimicry has changed the way in which we do engineering. Ecomimicry could itself have really big effects, including an adaptation to climate change, because we see animals adapting right now and unlocking codes that have been sitting dormant in evolution for quite a while. We have to capture those, understand them using AI, and potentially make use of them if we can.
That's a brilliant insight. Really, that's the subject of its own podcast on its own. Just that, it's just blowing my mind. I love it. I could talk about that for hours.
Yeah.
Well, Tim, one of the things I think is interesting with Unity and the mission, because I know a little bit about this because we've been talking about it also for a long time, is the movement towards an audio OS. And so when I think about what you're doing, the thing that's exciting to me is not just the headphones, it's the fact that you're creating a platform for audio that's absolutely new. And really, we're in a duopoly right now when it comes to systems. We have Android and we have Apple, and there's really, at least in the Western world, not much outside of that. And the thing that I find so exciting about Unity is that you've actually done more than create a headphone. You've created a platform for audio, and it's an independent system outside of the duopoly. That to me is the real value of Unity, this idea that there could be a more distributed, federated, sovereign approach to communication, right? So if you think about these systems, it's not just platforms for apps and stuff. They're really communication platforms. You've created more than a headphone. You've created a communication platform. Can you talk a little bit about why you did that?
Well, yeah, it kind of, I'd like to say that, it was a grand master plan, right? But we kind of stumbled into it, to be honest. And it was kind of a result of not being satisfied with the current state of affairs. I don't like not having a choice to get something done. I'm very critical of the way things are in my life, the way I achieve things. And I find that technology currently has an ego problem. Technology is all about, hey, look at me. Hey, update me. Hey, you need to get this new device. Hey, the wheels of technology are turning. It's got an ego problem. And all of us on a day-to-day basis, we're struggling with our technology, and it's getting in the way of the usefulness of technology to get things done. So we're living for technology these days, and it's not technology living for us. We've become a slave to the machines, as they predicted. I find that the most natural form of communication is by speech. That's how we communicate things to each other. We describe things, we talk about things, we talk it over, we discuss. For me, the most logical man-machine or human-machine interface is voice. You talk, and it talks back to you. You have a conversation with your machine, and it understands, and it doesn't get in the way. It knows when to ease off and go into the shadow. It takes care of itself because it's smart, right? It's AI. It should update itself silently in the background while you're sleeping. It should quietly go about its business and be ready for the next day. Why is it taking up so much of your time, your interaction, to take care of it? That I don't understand. And so with our audio OS, what we're trying to do is to build this system where it requires as little human interaction as required in order to get it to work and be functional for you in a useful way on a day-to-day basis. Technology needs to take a step back out of the spotlight and just exist. it's like, okay, so I score music for films from time to time also, and there's a thing that you call overscoring. So if you put too much music in a scene or this, that, the other, upstages the rest of the action on the screen, right? And right now technology is overscoring in our life, in our life's movie, and it needs to take a step back and go into the background and just kind of look. Technology, we know you're there. It's okay. We see you. We recognize you. We appreciate you. Now just ease off the gas a little bit. Give us a little space so that we can get other things done. So I guess that's...
Technology ceases to be a status symbol or a sign of an effort, but there's something that's so embedded into what you do that is taken for granted, or at least you become the expression of the technology as opposed to the technology with you.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, to finish your point on the audio OS, it's something that has a lot of use, and we see it as, I mean, it's a bold step. It's a step that hasn't been taken yet, obviously, and it's a risk. But that's the way I see our future interactions with technology happening, is more in the background, audio. It's just like, I'm talking to you, Stan. I don't need to know how you work. I don't need to know that you're getting all this updates and all these other things in your life and stuff like that. You just do that. And I trust you to do that, to take care of yourself. And we should allow the same for technology. I think it's hard to put into words.
Do you see, I think this is so exciting in many ways, because the opportunity for us to frankly evolve our perceptions towards that particular approach, whether it's a Star Trek, like talking to the computer, that's still pretty easy to observe, right? But sometimes I think, if you were to go back 10,000 years and hand somebody a phone, would they be able to have a conversation with somebody on their end and not really feel like that was a conversation? Or is that something that we've adapted to be able to learn so well, the same way we interact with any other elements of our phones now?
Well, that's an interesting thought, because I think we're right on the verge of what I would call audio AI. Like, we're probably months away from being able to have perpetual, ongoing conversations with the machine. That in and of itself is something that is very different from a human phone conversation. But we already have it with Siri to some extent, but I think it's about to go exponential.
But by the way, we're already having it. We're just typing it and it's typing back.
Yeah.
It's just, if you want to look at it in technical terms, it's just a matter of putting a VTT and a TTS interface on either side, voice to text and text to speech interface and get rid of the typing.
Yeah, we're close to it with Zeke, like probably.
No, but it's happening right now. It's happening.
No, we're behind.
You can get an app online and just talk, and it talks back to you and stuff like that. So that's not rocket science. That's just an interface. That's like connecting the microphone with XLR cable. That's the XLR to the Chat GPT or the AI or whatever you want to call it.
But I can't wait to see. So if you look at texting, whether texting actually counts as writing a message to somebody or not, or whether it's all shorthand and expressive in ways that are multi-layered and like deep in a lot of ways, once this becomes like, what are all the ways in which we, perception-wise and also expression-wise, will optimize our audio communications, both with AI and or each other, that are similar to the way in which you do so much shorthand over texting. And then it almost leads into fractals of different possibilities for communication and perception and efficiency.
Well, I have a question for you guys. So the other thing that we're close to is some sort of neural link connection. And I don't think any of the three of us have experienced that yet, but I do wonder how different that will be from audio. Like, what will that experience be like? Will it feel like a form of audio, or would it feel like a form of, how is that going to work? Like, how are we going to categorize that kind of communication? It's not writing, it's not hearing, it's...
Well, I think I think that's really exciting.
I wonder what that experience will feel like.
But there's a bit of a misconception, in my opinion, I think that's out there, which is that our brains are this like central processing system, and the rest of our bodies like react to them and essentially answer to our brains. Whereas I think it's a far more decentralized system. Even, for example, there's the paper out
recently. Because they say fascia is your brain too.
Yeah.
And it does all through your muscles.
Absolutely. And like recently, there's a paper that just came out about, they found a large neural network inside the eye that's responsible for stabilizing your vision as you walk down the street, so that by the time it gets to your brain, you're dealing with a stabilized vision. So even neurons themselves are distributed outside of the brain. And so this sense that if you plug directly into the brain, you're going to transcend all the rest. I think it's not necessarily appreciating the complexity of the orchestra that goes into our perception and
Agreed. I mean, I think at the end of the day, I don't know if I need that interface. That it's really invasive. But what I wanted to mention is that all of these communication, the means of communication that we have between texting and emojis and audio and visual and this, that, the other, they're not mutually exclusive. We said at the head of this, we talked about the key word or like the soundbite of this COP is inclusivity. I think with communication, inclusivity, all the different forms of communication are relevant and important. And so the more ways that we can include different aspects of communication into a global form of communication, the better.
So efficiency isn't always a virtue in a way. There's the extent to which you want to have those layers to allow for the complexity that leads to so much more.
And a different tool for a different job too.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah.
You know, you have a tool set, a toolkit in order to accomplish something. I think personally, like what I use my phone for a day-to-day basis, I think roughly about 70 to 80% of what I need to get done, I don't need a screen for. I could just say, hey, I need to book a table for 5 at 2:00, you know, at this place. And not go on my phone for 10 minutes to get a reservation, this, that, the other, and just have it done, you know. Or, you know, I'm leaving my meeting in 5 minutes, I need an Uber downstairs. Or, you know, you don't need to go into your phone for that. You can just like kind of say it to yourself, you know. Oh, before I forget, I need to send flowers. It's my daughter's birthday. Boom, it's taken care of. As opposed to having, and that saves a ton of time. And that's like, for me, that's like 70, 80%. We can take it a step further and go, hey, it's your daughter's birthday today. Just a little audio prompt. Flowers? Hey, yeah, sure, go. Let's do that.
And that all seems very short term that you can accomplish these things.
That's super easy. That's low hanging fruit.
I'm excited about some other areas here where so much of our perception anyway, it's increasingly well accepted that a lot of our perception of the world and the way we see each other is largely kind of generative AI in its own way, that we take a minimum of inputs as possible and then predict largely what we see in front of us. Fortunately, you know, I've seen Tim, I've seen Stan before, and so I know what you guys look like. How much do I actually need to look at you to know that Stan is well dressed today, and that we can and sort of fill it in. And so, in many ways, that's only prompted by those same inputs. Yeah. So it's when you can take those same medium, like hearing the rest, actually mix up what's coming in to make it unfamiliar, that you have the chance of actually perhaps changing those predictive outputs that probably have a lot to do with bias. Certainly have a lot to do with our self image, and because sound is a pretty wide range, whether visual is a pretty wide range, there's a way in which we can mix things up so that unfamiliar becomes a platform for change or for learning or for frankly just like new emotions, because the same inputs are going to get gobbled up to produce the same outputs for us over and over again, because it's the most efficient path to our perception. So we got to mix up the inputs.
I think we have room for two. I'm kind of curious if listening or not listening has ever backfired on you.
Listening or not listening?
Yeah.
Oh, well, you know, we listen a lot to the forest all over the world, and there's certainly things you hear that you might not want to, and disagreement over what you hear can be a really big part of it. So a lot of times we found that hearing, for example, hearing a chainsaw, hearing a threat in the forest, that can lead to disagreement. And so a lot of what we have to do is about getting in with the people there and making sure that we heard the same thing. So hearing something and diving into it, the sort of the forks of doubt that come out of that really matters. So sometimes hearing can be bad news, and there's all sorts of things that we put in place not to absorb the bad news.
I think there's a really important element to listening, which is around truth. So what is truth and what is not truth? And so you can listen to something that's not true, and you know, if you give that too much space and attention, it's not good. And so there's a point where listening isn't the thing that needs to be done. So I think we're on the edge of this, you know, with the election coming up, with the way that social media and communication works and the ability to broadcast so quickly, lies can be spread very, very quickly. And you have to be able to, we need new mechanisms for discerning truth. I actually think that this is where blockchain is going to become very important in ways that we can't even imagine. Like, I think that over time, the truth and the veracity of facts are going to have some kind of oracle that we go to know what's true. Like, we don't know, like, you can post a picture of a politician saying anything. Now, you can remix, Willie Nelson to sound like Lady Gaga in about a minute. Like, what is truth? And this is, I think, the fundamental question of our generation, is becoming aware of the value of truth. And I think that truth is more than the things you hear or the things you say. Truth is an energetic frequency. And when you waver from that energetic frequency, you can hit turbulence really quickly, but it's also a weapon. Mm-hmm. And when information is weaponized, there are casualties. And so we have to learn to really value truth. It's why we should pay for journalism. It's why we should value truth, because truth matters. And in a world where it's so easy to mislead people with untruth, being able to somehow recognize what is true is super important. And you also have to understand that from some perspectives, people have different truths. Mm-hmm. Somebody said on a panel this morning, female quotient, assume positive intent, and this is interesting for conflict. Like, sometimes it's just a matter of miscommunication, mm-hmm. mishearing, but, most times you could assume that people have positive intent. And when disagreement or conflict arises, there is a need for discerning that. But we have to admit and understand that sometimes people use their power, they use their voice in ways that are not honest, and they're using it to manipulate. The amount of manipulation that's happening with the wars right now, the amount of manipulation that's happening with climate, the amount of manipulation that's happening with health. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's people honestly, truthfully trying to help, positive intent, but that doesn't always make it true. And this is, I think, something we all have to face as a society. How are we going to get to truth and recognize and value that truth?
I think truth is an evolutionary process as well. Like truth, we expect truth to move with our understanding of what's there. And it's not a chance, it's not a gotcha chance, It's like the extent to which something is a best effort at the truth and well understood, you expect that to change and improve over time. Things don't have to stay static. And, as with blockchain being able to record these things, it's not about going back and saying, you said this and now you're saying this. We want to understand the process all the way through. It's a really strong point that you made.
Build it? Oh.
No, go ahead. I was going to say how to discern that is really, that's the conundrum.
That's what's becoming more difficult.
Yeah.
I find it, if you look at social nowadays, it's getting really difficult to tell what's real and what isn't. Yeah. And, we're just beginning to grapple with it. And imagine very soon you're going to have audio. Like, I was talking to somebody about the election coming up, and they were saying that the big black swan in the upcoming US election is the power of personalized communications through AI, being able to target in every individual voter and talk to an individual voter through AI, and to be able to manipulate that voter. I don't think we as a society are ready for that. I don't think if you have someone coming to you, a machine coming to you and telling you, looking at your biases, looking at your history, and then being able to target a manipulative statement to you or to convince you of something, I don't think the electorate's ready for that. I don't think I'm ready for it.
That's beyond gerrymandering.
I think on the flip side, there's power in that as well. If it's used for good, if the messenger is getting in the way of ideas being spread to people, whether it be political party or what someone looks like or the rest, being able to ease in on a different messenger for ideas that can be generally accepted as worth sharing is out there. So I'm not sure if I want to see the same person deliver the same message to me over and over again, but some people might online, or different messages. Same person delivering different messages to me online, but we might get there.
I hope you'll build a time capsule with me. What are your hopes for the legacy of COP28 in advancing global climate action?
Well, look, I think to Stan's point, it's in a very different location than it's been over the past few years. One that Degraye hasn't necessarily been associated with sustainability or positive actions on climate change, and I think it's very cool that they stepped up to host what has been an extremely functional meeting so far. I think that the combination, I mean, we're seeing a lot of new ideas really take center stage, everything from fusion energy to nature-based solutions and the rest. And I want to see those be a bigger part of the future, because they're approaching at exponentially faster rates. And it's only through better solutions that we can talk about phasing out fossil fuels. In the meantime, the impacts on society are ones that I don't think en masse people are willing to accept. So those are the two biggest high points of COP so far for me, are nature-based solutions around forestry and nature, and the inclusion of fusion energy in the conversation as like an actual solution in the reasonable term.
I think the speed at which we need to do things is becoming apparent to everybody after the last year. The climate disasters from every corner of the world have, I think, put everybody to more attention. But the reality is that the infrastructure that we have as a society is not fit for purpose for dealing with the challenge. I mean, we just have to admit it. So at Glasgow, my kind of overviewing, conclusion was system change is needed. I left very disappointed and nihilistic after Glasgow. At Sharm, I became much more hopeful around regenerative and the idea of regenerative everything as a pathway to doing it. I think for me, it's too early to say, because we're only into a few days of COP. If inclusion is the way that we're going to go, as kind of a theme, because these things build and build, I think that it comes back to what we talked about at Climate Week, which was the Prosperity for the Commons group and I were talking about this idea of equitable sustainability, the sense that there should be a principle in place that sustainability isn't enough. If you're going to do something, you should put some level of equitable action into the framework that you're developing. And that would be, I think, a really great outcome if we can get to a standard of including equitable creativity in the solutions. Because without that, I think we're going to fail, honestly. We can't solve climate change for the 1%. We can't solve climate change for the 10%. We have to solve it for everyone. And so if we don't have equitability at the center point of our conversation, then I think we'll fail.
Tim, will you close us out with just how music can bring in equity and inspire it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm listening to everyone talk about the COP and the environment and climate change and everything, and my only hope is that it doesn't become over politicized and used as a political weapon, as opposed to being used for its intent, which is to solve climate change. I've seen a lot of really wonderful movements get hijacked and politicized and corrupted, and my only hope is that it remains that. How it ties into music is, the purer the music, the better the people connect, and the better they understand each other, and maybe take note, no pun intended, from the musician's standpoint, and depoliticize things and maybe bring it into a more artistic musical environment. And from there, I'm sure we can find wonderful ways to work together to achieve sustainable change.
What's so amazing is in music, the top-down way in which music becomes available to us hasn't taken away the ability of individuals to play music and appreciate it and appreciate music together. And certainly in climate, there will be these top-down solutions that we have to implement society-wide, including very corporate ones. But ultimately, it's everyone like feeling that they have a part to play, sharing with others, the same way music pervades society and identity. I think there's a lot to share there.
Yeah.
I'm so glad to team up with Hatch and Hub Culture this week in Dubai. Be sure to get more episodes wherever you get your podcasts at the Hub Culture Chronicle discussions. Tim, Stan, Topher, thanks so much for being here.